When we think of the Vikings, the first images that often come to mind are of brutal warriors charging into battle, longships slicing through icy waters, and fierce men and women carving their names into the blood-soaked pages of history. Their lives were filled with danger, violence, and endless struggle for survival. And yet, despite the chaos that surrounded them, there is strong reason to believe that these Norse warriors may have enjoyed one of the most restful and healthiest sleep cycles in human history. It's a strange contradiction. How could people who lived in such a harsh, unforgiving world sleep more soundly than we do today? This mystery becomes even more fascinating when we compare their reality to ours. Today we live in climate-controlled homes with memory foam mattresses, blackout curtains, and access to sleep science and technology. We have apps that track our REM cycles, herbal teas for relaxation, and thousands of products promising a better night's rest. And yet, modern sleep is in crisis. Millions of people suffer from insomnia, stress-induced restlessness, and disrupted sleep patterns. In contrast, the Vikings, who had none of these luxuries, likely went to sleep faster, slept deeper, and woke up more refreshed than many of us ever do. So, what was their secret? Understanding Viking sleep starts with understanding their rhythm of life. Unlike the modern 9-to-5 grind, where artificial schedules often disconnect us from nature, the Vikings lived closely aligned with the natural world. Their days began with the sunrise and ended when darkness fell. There were no glowing screens to stare into at midnight, no buzzing phones keeping them on edge. Instead, they followed the natural cues of the earth, sunlight, firelight, darkness, which perfectly regulated their internal clocks. The Vikings also lived extremely physical lives. From farming and fishing to sailing and fighting, their bodies were in a constant state of movement. Physical exhaustion was a daily reality, not a rare event. By nightfall, their bodies craved rest, not because of mental fatigue from scrolling or overthinking, but because of real, demanding labor. In contrast, many people today work sedentary jobs, stay mentally overstimulated late into the night, and then wonder why sleep doesn't come easy. For Vikings, the body and mind were ready to shut down in harmony with the night. Another element that supported their rest was the absence of what we today call chronic stress. Now, that's not to say the Viking world wasn't dangerous. It absolutely was. They faced warfare, hunger, disease, and the harsh northern climate. But the type of stress they experienced was immediate and situational. A threat came, they dealt with it, and they moved on. Unlike modern stress, which is ongoing, abstract, and often unresolvable, like job insecurity, economic pressure, or existential dread, Viking stress was short-lived. This allowed for longer periods of mental peace and emotional balance, which are critical for uninterrupted, high-quality sleep. What's even more fascinating is how their beliefs and worldview contributed to a calm mind. The Vikings believed in fate, WRD, and that the Norns, mythical beings, had already woven the thread of their destiny. This belief gave them a deep sense of acceptance about life and death. They didn't spend sleepless nights worrying about what might happen tomorrow. To them, the future was already written. This spiritual fatalism, far from being depressive, offered comfort. It reduced anxiety and allowed them to embrace the present moment fully, including moments of rest. Then there's the environment they slept in. Viking homes were simple, communal longhouses made of timber, mud, and turf. These spaces were dark, insulated, and naturally cool, conditions which modern sleep science now says are ideal for deep rest. The absence of artificial lighting meant melatonin levels, the hormone responsible for sleep, were never interrupted. Firelight and candlelight, the only sources of illumination, created a soft, warm glow that helped the body wind down slowly instead of being jolted by blue light. In a way, their technology-free world protected their biology. The Vikings also had tight-knit communities and strong family units. In many longhouses, families and even livestock slept in close quarters for warmth and safety. While that may sound uncomfortable to us today, it created a powerful sense of security and belonging. Sleep researchers agree that feelings of emotional safety greatly affect sleep quality. The Vikings weren't isolated in separate rooms. They were surrounded by people they trusted. That physical closeness likely contributed to mental relaxation and deeper sleep. Modern science also supports the idea that sleeping in a cool environment, away from noise and artificial light, leads to more restorative sleep. Vikings lived in some of the coldest and quietest regions of the northern hemisphere. The distant howl of wolves or the rustling of wind through pine trees were more soothing than disturbing. In contrast, our cities buzz with unnatural sounds, cars, sirens, digital pings, and our brains never fully shut off. In this regard, the Vikings' rustic world was better suited for true rest than our so-called advanced societies. There's also the nutritional aspect. The Viking diet was rich in whole foods, fresh fish, grains, berries, root vegetables. They didn't consume processed sugar, caffeine, or chemical preservatives, which are all known to disrupt sleep. Many of their meals contained omega-3 fatty acids and magnesium-rich ingredients, both of which promote relaxation and reduce insomnia. A Viking warrior who ended his day with a hearty, natural meal and no caffeine likely entered the night in a better state of sleep readiness than a modern person with coffee in hand and a TV blasting in the background. So, how did ruthless warriors sleep like babies? Perhaps the better question is, how could they not? Everything about their lifestyle, from the environment they lived in to the mindset they carried, was designed, intentionally or not, to promote rest, recovery, and resilience. Their violent days were matched by deeply restful nights. They embraced nature instead of fighting it. They accepted their fate instead of fearing it. And they lived with their people instead of being isolated behind digital screens and locked doors. The Viking sleep mystery isn't really a mystery at all, it's a mirror. It shows us how far we've drifted from the most basic human rhythms. And it quietly dares us to ask, if the fiercest warriors in history could sleep with such peace, what's stopping us? Natural systems that regulate sleep. In essence, the Viking lifestyle forced a harmony between body and environment. It demanded movement, presence, and participation. It provided no shortcuts, no excuses, and no indulgence in laziness. Every day's hard work made the night's rest a reward. There was no need for sleep therapy, no need for noise machines or weighted blankets. Sleep wasn't engineered, it was earned. And it came naturally, like the rising of the moon or the turning of the tides. Today we chase better sleep through products and programs. The Vikings didn't have that luxury, but they also didn't need it. Their secret wasn't found in technology or supplements. It was written into the very fabric of their lives. Move more, stress less, live close to the land, and when night falls, let sleep come. Imagine a life without constant notifications, without meetings stacked on calendars, without alarms rudely interrupting your dreams. For the Vikings, this wasn't fantasy, it was reality. Their lives were not ruled by ticking clocks or digital reminders, but by the slow, steady rhythm of nature itself. In today's world, we often complain about being tired despite doing so little. But in truth, we're constantly engaged, mentally, emotionally, digitally. The Vikings, in contrast, lived a life of deliberate action followed by intentional rest. And one of the key reasons they likely slept so well was because they lived without the artificial stressors we now see as normal. There were no clocks in Viking times. Time was tracked by the sun's path, the moon's cycle, and seasonal changes. Days began when the sun rose and ended when it set. That natural light-dark pattern is the foundation of our circadian rhythm, the internal body clock that tells us when to wake and when to sleep. Today, artificial light from screens and buildings can easily disrupt that rhythm, confusing our brains into thinking it's still daytime. But Vikings didn't have this problem. When the world around them grew dark, their bodies responded accordingly. Melatonin production increased naturally, signaling to the brain that it was time to wind down. They didn't need to force sleep, it came because their biology was perfectly aligned with their environment. Another major difference was the absence of modern stress. Today's stress is relentless. It's not the kind of fear that passes quickly like a thunderstorm, it lingers, gnaws at us, and builds up quietly. Whether it's job insecurity, financial pressure, social anxiety, or fear of the future, modern life is drenched in uncertainty and overstimulation. These constant pressures elevate cortisol, the body's main stress hormone. And elevated cortisol levels, especially at night, directly interfere with sleep. It's like trying to fall asleep with an internal alarm blaring. Vikings, however, lived with a different kind of stress, situational, not chronic. When danger came, such as a raid, a harsh storm, or a failed harvest, they dealt with it directly. They fought, they endured, they adapted. But once the situation was over, so was the stress. There were no emails to answer, no social media conflicts to ruminate over, no bills piling up in the corner of the longhouse. The mental load was lighter, and as a result, their bodies had more chances to fully relax. Because their stressors were physical and immediate, not emotional and endless, the Viking body had time to reset. After a day of labor or battle, their sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight mode, could return to its resting state. This allowed the parasympathetic nervous system, responsible for rest and recovery, to take over. Today, many people remain stuck in fight-or-flight mode for days, weeks, even years, never giving their bodies the green light to fully rest. For the Vikings, that shift between tension and calm was natural, frequent, and vital to their survival. It's also important to recognize that Viking society didn't run on deadlines or rigid time blocks. Tasks were completed when necessary, not according to arbitrary calendar demands. If the weather shifted, so did the plan. If there was no urgency, there was no unnecessary rush. This flexibility might seem primitive to modern minds, but it allowed for a more fluid and less pressured daily routine. That kind of pace prevented the buildup of stress hormones and reduced the need to lie awake at night, overthinking and worrying. Even their worldview supported better mental peace. Vikings believed deeply in fate, the idea that life followed a course already woven by mystical beings called the Norns. This belief in destiny may sound superstitious to us today, but it gave Vikings a powerful sense of psychological acceptance. If one's death and future were already written, there was little point in worrying endlessly about tomorrow. This mindset did not lead to apathy, but rather to courage and focus. They lived with intensity but not with the anxiety of trying to control the uncontrollable. This spiritual surrender is something modern psychology now echoes in ideas like mindfulness and acceptance therapy. There's also the absence of screen time, something we now know severely affects sleep quality. The Viking world was dark after sundown, lit only by torches, candles, and the soft orange glow of a hearth fire. This kind of warm, dim lighting is far more conducive to restful sleep than the blue light of phones, TVs, and laptops. Today, millions of people stare into artificial light late into the night, delaying melatonin release and pushing their internal clocks out of sync. Vikings didn't need to unplug. Their entire environment did it for them. Let's not forget the mental bandwidth that digital life consumes. Every modern person carries dozens of open tabs in their mind. Messages, reminders, tasks, comparisons, distractions. This constant mental stimulation leaves no space for quiet. It clutters the mind, filling it with unfinished thoughts and unresolved tension. The Viking brain, though often busy with planning and survival, was not assaulted by endless noise. Their attention was focused, their tasks were physical, and their end-of-day routine was simple. Eat, sit by the fire, talk, and sleep. No scrolling. No doom scrolling. No TikTok. Just the night. Even social expectations were different. Modern life demands constant visibility. We must show up, be productive, be presentable, be responsive. Social media has made it impossible to truly log off. In contrast, Viking culture valued presence over performance. Success was measured by contribution to the community, not by likes or followers. This reduced pressure to constantly prove oneself likely had a calming effect on the nervous system. A Viking didn't go to sleep thinking, "Did I post enough today?" Or, "What do people think of me right now?" That freedom from performance anxiety gave space for awe. To understand why Vikings may have had such restorative sleep, we must first walk in their shoes, or rather their fur-wrapped boots. The daily life of a Viking was not one of comfort, but of constant motion. These were people who lived by their hands, by the oars of their ships, by the rhythm of the land and sea. There were no treadmills, no workout plans, no personal trainers, and yet every Viking was in peak physical condition. Why? Because their survival depended on it. From the moment the sun crept above the fjords, the Viking day began with purpose. Most were farmers, not warriors, a fact often overlooked in popular culture. They worked long hours in the fields, planting barley and rye, harvesting hay, tending to livestock and maintaining their homesteads. This was not passive, desk-bound labor. Viking farming required relentless manual effort, lifting, hauling, cutting, digging, tasks that demanded full-body strength and endurance. Every day their muscles were pushed to their limits. By nightfall their bodies didn't just want rest, they needed it to recover. But their lives extended beyond the soil. For coastal Viking communities, sailing was as routine as farming. Whether for fishing, trade, or raiding, the longship was central to their identity. Rowing a ship through icy waters was grueling work, requiring raw strength and rhythm. Hours upon hours of repetitive motion trained their upper bodies, shoulders, and backs in ways that modern gym-goers could only dream of. Each journey was a test of endurance, balance, and weather-hardened toughness. When these men finally lay down at night, their bodies were worn, but their minds were clear, a powerful recipe for deep sleep. Then came the raids, perhaps the most infamous part of Viking life. While not all Vikings participated in them, many did, especially during the warmer months. These raids weren't just chaotic bursts of violence. They involved meticulous planning, long voyages, physical confrontation, and carrying heavy loads of plunder back home. Combat was physical in the extreme, swinging swords, lifting shields, sprinting across foreign terrain. The adrenaline high of battle was often followed by an equally intense crash. After such exertion, sleep wasn't optional, it was the body's natural recovery response. Even at home, rest was earned. Viking women worked just as hard as men, if not harder. They managed households, prepared meals, wove clothing, raised children, milked livestock, and maintained the food stores, all without modern appliances or conveniences. A single day in a Viking household could involve grinding grain by hand, carrying water from a stream, or preparing food from scratch using heavy iron tools. Children too were expected to help from an early age. There were no idle hands in a Viking home, no lazy mornings scrolling through social media. Every family member contributed, physically, constantly. The nature of Viking life was cyclical, following the seasons. In summer, days were long and labor was intense. Building homes, clearing land, making repairs, gathering food. In winter, the work shifted indoors, mending clothing, carving tools, preserving meat, and preparing for the brutal cold. Even their rest was seasonal, with longer sleep periods during the dark, freezing winters and shorter ones during the sunlit summer days. This natural rhythm, built into the world around them, reinforced a healthy balance between activity and rest. Because their energy was spent on survival, not entertainment, the Vikings were free of many of the mental distractions that plague modern sleep. There was no mental stimulation from screens or artificial light. They weren't overstimulated by endless choices or digital noise. Their days ended as the sun set, and their bodies, already pushed to the edge of exhaustion, transitioned smoothly into rest. The lack of sedentary living, combined with a highly active lifestyle, kept their bodies in sync with nature's cues. The result? Their internal sleep clocks remained perfectly aligned with the environment. Another important aspect of Viking life was its unpredictability. They didn't live in a world of rigid routines and schedules. Their work was based on the needs of the moment. If a storm came, they responded. If crops needed harvesting, they acted. There was a certain fluidity and adaptability in their daily lives that allowed them to move with nature, not against it. This flexibility reduced the kind of chronic, psychological stress that builds up in highly scheduled, inflexible modern lives. The pressure of performance, deadlines, or status was largely absent. In its place was a focus on practical survival, on doing what needed to be done, and then resting without guilt. There's something primal and deeply human about the Viking lifestyle. In today's world, people spend hours in gyms trying to simulate the kind of functional, full-body movement the Vikings performed naturally. We use apps to remind us to walk 10,000 steps, while a Viking may have done triple that before noon. We chase endorphins through spin classes and high-intensity interval training, while a Viking built those same chemical releases into everyday life through meaningful labor. Their lives were hard, but those hardships made their rest more complete. Viking communities also emphasized cooperation. Tasks like shipbuilding, hunting, or constructing homes were shared efforts. Working in groups helped reduce loneliness and promoted social bonding. Studies now show that social connection is deeply tied to sleep health. People who feel isolated or unsupported tend to sleep worse, while those with strong community ties rest more easily. The Vikings, by necessity, were tightly bound to one another. That emotional security, combined with physical exertion, created a powerful combination that encouraged peaceful sleep. We also can't overlook their exposure to nature. Whether on land or at sea, Vikings were constantly outdoors. Sunlight regulated their circadian rhythms. Fresh air flooded their lungs all day. They were grounded, literally, in ways we are not. They walked barefoot or in leather shoes, touched soil and stone, breathed clean air. Their bodies were in tune with their surroundings. In contrast, many people today spend most of their waking hours indoors under artificial light, breathing recycled air, disconnected from the earth. That disconnection is now understood to disrupt even purposes, but because their very survival depended on it. The length of days and nights, the migration of animals, the shift in weather, all of it informed when to rise, when to work, and when to rest. This deep awareness of nature's pace provided a psychological structure to their daily lives. Sleep came not as a scheduled task but as a natural, expected phase in the flow of each day. Even the soundscape of the Viking environment played a role in restfulness. Modern white noise machines attempt to replicate the natural sounds Vikings would have experienced. The rustle of leaves, the patter of rain on a roof, the lapping of water against a longship. These organic sounds help lull the brain into a relaxed state, activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which promotes rest and recovery. For the Viking, these sounds were not accessories, they were life. They were the background to every dream, every midnight breath. Another fascinating aspect is how outdoor exposure during the day primed their bodies for better sleep at night. Because so much of their life took place outside, farming, fishing, hunting, sailing, they were constantly exposed to natural light during daylight hours. This consistent light exposure helped regulate their circadian rhythm, keeping their bodies in tune with natural sleep-wake cycles. In contrast, modern people often suffer from circadian disruption due to spending most of their day under artificial indoor lighting. The Viking lifestyle ensured their bodies knew when it was day, and just as importantly when it was night. Seasonal changes in light also shaped their sleeping habits. During the long, dark winters, nights stretched for 14 to 16 hours. It's likely that Vikings slept in two phases, a practice known as segmented sleep, with a waking period in between where they might talk, tend fires, or share stories. This style of sleep has been documented across pre-industrial societies and may have allowed for deeper, more flexible rest. During short summer nights, sleep periods would shrink, but the increase in daytime physical activity likely compensated by making even those shorter rest windows deeply restorative. Additionally, Viking spirituality was deeply connected to the natural world. They believed in gods and spirits that lived within the earth, sky, wind, and sea. Trees were sacred. Mountains were alive. The weather was divine will. This reverence for nature created a mental harmony that modern society often lacks. Rather than seeing the environment as something to conquer or control, Vikings coexisted with it. That sense of respect and surrender likely fostered a mindset that supported peace and acceptance, two essential ingredients for a restful mind. Sleeping close to nature also meant that Vikings were constantly grounded, not just figuratively but literally. Walking barefoot, touching stone and soil, sitting by rivers or fires, all of this falls under what modern wellness calls earthing or grounding. Emerging research suggests that contact with natural surfaces may reduce inflammation, improve mood, and promote better sleep. The Vikings weren't studying scientific journals, but they were living in a way that allowed their bodies to benefit from these principles daily. So, what made the Viking night so restful? It wasn't just luck or toughness. It was their complete immersion in nature. Their sleep environment was cold but healing, silent but safe, dark but calming. The very elements that we now try to recreate with machines, cold temperatures, white noise, blackout curtains, were simply part of their everyday life. They didn't design their world around sleep. They lived in a world that naturally produced sleep. For us today, the lesson is clear. While we can't all live in the forests of Scandinavia or sleep beside a crackling fire, we can reconnect with the rhythms of nature. Lowering the thermostat, spending more time outdoors, reducing artificial light at night, and creating silence in our homes can help us inch closer to what the Vikings experienced every evening. In the end, the role of nature in Viking sleep wasn't a luxury, it was the foundation. And it's a foundation we'd be wise to rebuild in our own lives. White heavy checkmark ready to move forward to Chapter 6. Herbal Wisdom of the North, or would you like to explore visual concepts or narration ideas for this chapter first? Ask ChatGPT. You said. Now start with Chapter 1 and write me this chapter in paragraph wise no in poetic wise. Chapter 6. Herbal Wisdom of the North. Word count 1200 Vikings used calming herbs, valerian, chamomile-type plants. Natural teas or stews at night. How these worked as sleep aids. ChatGPT said. Absolutely Jawiria. Here is Chapter 6. Herbal Wisdom of the North, written in paragraph form, not poetic, with a target of approximately 1,200 words. It explores how the Vikings used natural herbs and remedies for relaxation and better sleep, blending historical insight with modern scientific understanding. Chapter 6. Herbal Wisdom of the North. Approximate. 1,200 words. The image of a Viking often conjures visions of war, axe-wielding raiders charging into battle with fury in their eyes and blood on their hands. But there was another side to their world, one far removed from conquest and chaos. When the long day's labor was done, and the firelight flickered gently in their longhouses, Vikings turned to the earth for comfort. Their connection to the land wasn't just about survival. It was medicinal. They knew the plants that healed wounds, soothed the mind, and, perhaps most importantly, calmed the body into deep, rejuvenating sleep. Unlike the modern world's dependence on synthetic sleep aids and lab-made melatonin, Viking societies relied on what nature offered freely: herbs, roots, and flowers with calming, sedative-like properties. These remedies were passed down through generations, their use rooted in tradition and shaped by the seasons. Sleep wasn't forced or medicated, it was invited gently by the careful hand of natural medicine. One of the most prominent herbs believed to be in Viking use, based on archaeological findings and the herbal traditions of surrounding Norse cultures, was valerian root. Known today for its sedative effects and often sold in capsule or tea form, valerian is a plant that has been used across Europe for thousands of years. It grows easily in cool northern climates, including those found in Scandinavia. When prepared correctly, usually as a tea, tincture, or added to a broth, valerian helps reduce anxiety, relax muscles, and shorten the time it takes to fall asleep. For a Viking returning from a hard day of hunting or rowing a longship against winds, valerian tea may have been the key to slipping into sleep despite physical tension. Valerian works by increasing the level of GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, in the brain, a neurotransmitter that reduces nerve activity and induces a calming effect. Modern science confirms what ancient cultures already practiced. This herb doesn't knock a person out but instead eases the mind and body into a natural state of rest. The Vikings might not have known the biochemistry, but through experience and oral tradition, they understood its effect. It helped people feel safe enough to sleep deeply. Another soothing herb likely used by the Norse was chamomile, or a chamomile-like plant. While traditional chamomile, Matricaria chamomilla, is native to more temperate parts of Europe, variations of similar daisy-like herbs grew in the Viking world and were often used in herbal remedies. Chamomile is known today for its mild sedative effect, often brewed into tea to promote relaxation before bedtime. Its properties include muscle relaxation, reduced inflammation, and an ability to calm the nervous system, all crucial for restful sleep. In Viking society, where physical exertion was a daily norm and emotional stress could be triggered by survival struggles, calming the body through such herbs was more than just tradition, it was a necessity. Whether brewed into warm nighttime teas, added to hearty stews, or infused in hot water and inhaled, these botanicals became a part of the sleep ritual, soothing tired muscles and quieting active minds. Herbs weren't the only tools in the Viking sleep arsenal. Meadowsweet, a plant that grew in abundance across Scandinavia, was also frequently used in both medicine and ritual. Its properties include mild pain relief and anti-inflammatory effects, much like a natural aspirin. While primarily used to treat fevers and wounds, it may also have served as a nighttime tonic, easing physical discomfort and promoting a sense of ease before bed. For people living without modern painkillers, this herbal comfort would have made the transition into sleep far more manageable. In addition to these, the Vikings likely made use of mugwort, a herb tied to dreams, sleep, and mystical visions across many ancient cultures. Mugwort was known for stimulating vivid dreams and was believed to open the mind to the spiritual world during sleep. It could be brewed, smoked, or placed under pillows as part of bedtime rituals. In Norse mythology, dreams often carried messages from the gods or ancestors, and mugwort may have played a role in accessing those visions. For the Vikings, sleep wasn't just rest, it was a bridge to a different realm. These herbal remedies weren't isolated. They were part of a broader evening ritual rooted in community, fire, warmth, and nourishment. As the sun dipped below the horizon and chill settled into the timber walls, Viking households gathered around central hearths to share food and stories. It was common to drink herbal teas or warm broths infused with calming roots and flowers, prepared not just for nutrition, but for their sleep-enhancing effects. The atmosphere in these homes would have been cozy, not by luxury but by design. Low firelight cast a calming amber glow. The body, tired from physical exertion, began to slow. Warm drinks rich with herbs soothed the gut and relaxed the nerves. There were no glowing screens to delay melatonin production, no artificial stimulants to trick the mind into wakefulness. Sleep came not as an interruption but as a welcomed phase of the day. This routine created a natural, slow descent into rest, with herbs serving as the final, gentle nudge. And unlike many modern sleep aids, these botanicals didn't produce grogginess or addiction. They aligned with the body's natural rhythm, supporting rather than disrupting it. Sleep was a sacred necessity, something to be protected and enhanced, not suppressed or ignored. Viking women, often the keepers of household wisdom, were the primary herbalists. They gathered, dried, and stored plants with care. Seasonal herbs were often preserved in fat or fermented with honey to ensure availability through long winters. These women understood which herbs were safe for children, which combinations worked best, and how to treat everything from sleeplessness to nightmares. Their knowledge was not written down but passed orally, a priceless legacy of quiet healers in a world of warriors. It's also important to note that the Viking respect for herbs wasn't purely medicinal, it was also spiritual. Plants were seen as gifts from the gods, especially from Freya, the Norse goddess of love, beauty and fertility, who was also associated with seer, magic. The use of herbs in rituals, charms and dream-invoking spells was common. Sleep, therefore, was more than physical rest. It was a time for connection with ancestors, omens and divine guidance. The Viking worldview embraced holistic living, a balance between mind, body and environment. Their use of herbs was a perfect example of this philosophy. They didn't wait for illness or sleeplessness to appear. Instead, they worked with nature to maintain balance daily, and sleep was one of the most protected parts of that equilibrium. Their herbal traditions weren't cures. They were preventative, nurturing and wise. In our modern world, where people often chase rest through pills, sleep trackers and anxiety-induced bedtime rituals, there's something deeply humbling in the simplicity of Viking sleep practices. A warm drink made from the earth, a fire, a tired body, a quiet mind. And sleep, when it came, was whole, real and undisturbed. We may live in a world centuries removed from the Vikings, but their herbal wisdom remains timeless. The same plants still grow. The same ingredients still heal. And the same principle still applies: when we listen to nature we sleep better. The Vikings didn't fight sleep. They invited it naturally. White heavy checkmark. Let me know if you'd like to proceed with Chapter 7, Spiritual Calm and Inner Peace, or if you want image prompt ideas or narration style guides for this chapter too. You said. Chapter 7, Spiritual Calm and Inner Peace. Now start with Chapter 1 and write me this chapter in paragraph wise. No in poetic wise word count. 1200 Belief in fate/destiny, Norse mythology. No fear of future, what will happen will happen. Low anxiety equals peaceful mind at night. ChatGPT said. Absolutely, Jawiria. Here is Chapter 7, Spiritual Calm and Inner Peace, written in paragraph form, not poetic, targeting approximately 1,200 words. This chapter explores how the Viking spiritual beliefs contributed to a calmer mind and deeper, undisturbed sleep. Chapter 7, Spiritual Calm and Inner Peace. Approximate. 1,200 words. In the heart of Norse society beat a spiritual rhythm deeply rooted in fate, mythology and the mysteries of the cosmos. To the modern mind, Viking life might appear relentlessly brutal, filled with war, loss and uncertainty, yet beneath the surface of their rugged world lay a profound sense of peace. This peace didn't come from wealth, comfort or modern psychology, but from a belief system that made sense of the chaos and placed each individual firmly within a cosmic order. The Viking worldview wasn't just about surviving the day, it was about accepting that life and death followed a preordained path. That very belief system created a spiritual foundation that allowed the Norse people to face each day with confidence and to end each night with restful sleep. At the core of Viking spirituality was WRD, the idea that a person's fate was woven long before they were born. According to Norse mythology, three powerful beings known as the Norns sat at the base of Yggdrasil, the world tree, weaving the destinies of all living things. These divine weavers shaped the path of every Viking from cradle to grave, and no one could alter what was set in motion. For many in the modern world, this would sound like a terrifying lack of control. But to the Vikings it was liberating. The understanding that one's life was already destined removed the burden of constant worry and overthinking. There was no point in fearing the unknown future or obsessing over what might go wrong. Vikings believed that what was meant to happen would happen, whether in battle, in harvest, or in love. This deep spiritual confidence allowed them to live fully in the present. It meant that at night, when the fires dimmed and the world went quiet, there was no need to lie awake wrestling with questions of what if. Anxiety had no grip on those who believed their path was already set. This fatalistic outlook translated into real emotional benefits. Modern science has proven that one of the leading causes of insomnia is anxiety about the future, whether it's finances, relationships, health, or survival. Our minds, untethered from certainty, spiral into hypotheticals and stress-inducing scenarios. But the Viking worldview short-circuited that process. By embracing fate, they minimized fear. When one doesn't fear the future, sleep becomes far easier to welcome. It wasn't just belief in fate that calmed Viking minds, it was the stories they told, the myths and legends that gave structure to the universe. The Norse gods weren't distant or unknowable. They were flawed, human-like, and often suffered as much as mortals. Odin, the All-Father, sacrificed himself for wisdom. Thor, mighty as he was, faced constant battles against chaos. Even the end of the world, Ragnarok, was accepted as inevitable. The Viking soul lived with the understanding that even the gods were bound by fate. This universal fairness and sense of shared struggle brought comfort. In their daily lives, Vikings drew strength and serenity from these myths. Children were raised hearing stories of honor, bravery, and endurance. These tales weren't simply for entertainment, they were spiritual lessons teaching how to live and how to die with dignity. When facing hardship, loss, or the threat of battle, a Viking could recall that even the gods endured pain. Suffering was not meaningless. It was part of the weave. And when night fell, these beliefs didn't vanish. They came alive in the flickering firelight and whispered prayers. Before bed, many Norse families would make offerings to the gods, small tokens of thanks or protection, to ensure safety through the dark hours. Sleep itself was seen as a sacred state, a time when the soul might wander, dream, or even receive messages from the divine. Just as the waking world was filled with omens and signs, the dream world was equally significant. The Viking approach to dreams was deeply tied to their spiritual practices. They believed that dreams could carry messages from ancestors or foretell important events. This elevated sleep to something almost mystical. To fall asleep wasn't simply to rest, it was to enter a realm where one might be guided, warned, or empowered. This reverence toward dreams encouraged a peaceful mindset before bed. Rather than fearing nightmares or restlessness, Vikings embraced sleep as a portal to meaning. Moreover, Viking culture placed high value on ritual and routine, especially surrounding rest. From the careful arrangement of the sleeping area to shared mealtime before bed, their lives were filled with spiritually meaningful actions. Even the act of sharing a longhouse with family and kin was a form of spiritual reassurance. Sleeping close to others, warmed by the same fire, protected by the same walls, gave a feeling of collective safety both physically and emotionally. The soul, surrounded by loved ones and guided by gods, was not alone in the dark. It's important to note that Viking spirituality wasn't dogmatic. There were no rigid priests or centralized scriptures dictating how one should live. Instead, Norse spirituality was woven into everyday life, from farming to sailing, from raising children to dying in battle. This natural integration meant that spiritual calm wasn't something they had to seek, it was ever present. When life itself feels meaningful and ordered, the mind becomes quieter. And a quiet mind is fertile ground for deep, restorative sleep. One of the most psychologically grounding aspects of Norse belief was their focus on legacy rather than longevity. Vikings didn't necessarily want long lives, they wanted meaningful ones. To be remembered after death was more important than avoiding it. The idea of dying in bed from old age was seen by many warriors as less honorable than dying in battle, sword in hand. But even for farmers or artisans, a life well lived was one of courage, truth, and contribution to the clan. This mindset erased the constant, sleep-disrupting fear of death that plagues many today. When death is not feared but seen as a passage, sometimes even a reward, it removes a great mental weight. That weight, in modern times, keeps many awake at night. The fear of illness, the unknown, the end. For the Vikings, death was merely a chapter in a longer saga. Whether one went to Valhalla, Folkvanger, or Hell, the afterlife was not an abyss but a destination. In the modern world, people try meditation apps, sleep music, and cognitive behavioral therapy to quiet their thoughts at night. While these tools can help, the root problem often remains: a disconnect between daily life and a sense of purpose. The Vikings didn't have this issue. Their sense of identity, meaning, and belief in a cosmic order gave them the mental serenity many people lack today. Their sleep wasn't just the product of physical exhaustion or herbal teas. It was also the natural outcome of a spiritually rooted life. A life where each day mattered, where each hardship had meaning, and where each dream carried weight. A life where fear did not dominate the mind as night fell, but where peace settled in, like snow on a quiet fjord. In the Viking world, the fire eventually dimmed, the warriors laid down their arms and the storytellers rested their voices. And when they slept, they did so not with anxiety or dread, but with trust. Trust in the gods, trust in fate, and trust that sleep was just another step on a long, mysterious journey. White heavy checkmark. Let me know when you're ready for Chapter 8, Family Bonds and Shared Warmth, or if you'd like narration advice, visual prompts, or summaries for what's written so far. You said. Chapter 8, Family Bonds and Shared Warmth. Now start with Chapter 1 and write me this chapter in paragraph wise. No, in poetic wise word count 1200 families slept close, shared fires and spaces. Emotional security, safety from loneliness. Togetherness boosted mental well-being. ChatGPT said. Absolutely, Jawiria. Here's your Chapter 8, Family Bonds and Shared Warmth, written in clear paragraph style, not poetic, and expanded to meet the 1,200-word target. This chapter highlights the emotional and psychological benefits of Viking family sleeping arrangements and community warmth. Chapter 8, Family Bonds and Shared Warmth. Approximate. 1,200 words. In the long, dark winters of Scandinavia, survival wasn't just about strength or skill, it was about connection. The Viking world was cold, unforgiving, and often harsh, yet within their homes, a different environment thrived, one of closeness, warmth, and emotional bonding. Longhouses, the main form of Viking dwelling, weren't merely buildings. They were living, breathing hubs of human connection. And perhaps the greatest secret to the Vikings' restful sleep lay not in their herbs or their beliefs, but in who they shared their nights with. Unlike the modern world, where personal space and individual bedrooms are a cultural norm, the Vikings lived communally. The typical longhouse was one single open space, often housing an extended family, workers, and even livestock. Sleeping areas weren't isolated rooms with locked doors, they were sections of the communal hall, partitioned only slightly if at all by wooden beams or hanging fabrics. Families slept close, parents with children, siblings side by side, elders nearby, all tucked in beside the warm embers of the central hearth. This closeness wasn't a burden, it was a blessing. Modern science confirms what the Vikings instinctively practiced. Humans are social sleepers. Physical proximity to others during rest can significantly reduce stress levels, heart rates, and nighttime awakenings. The presence of a loved one, even just the sound of their breathing, triggers a feeling of safety in the brain. In a world filled with dangers, the Vikings found a powerful source of security simply by sleeping together under one roof. This closeness also provided essential protection against loneliness, a factor that deeply impacts mental and physical health. Loneliness today is called an epidemic, linked to insomnia, depression, and early mortality. But in Viking times, solitude was rare, especially at night. There was always someone close, a sibling to curl beside, a parent's voice whispering near the fire, or the comforting bulk of a grandparent wrapped in furs. Even livestock added warmth and a sense of life. You were never truly alone in a longhouse. And this constant connection helped Vikings drift into sleep without the cold fear of isolation. The hearth fire played a crucial role in this dynamic. At the center of every Viking home burned a fire that rarely went out. It provided heat, cooked food, and lit the darkness, but more than that, it symbolized unity and shared life. Families gathered around it at day's end, exchanging stories, preparing meals, or simply warming their limbs. As the flames died down, bodies curled close to one another near the residual heat. This ritual of shared warmth wasn't just physical, it was deeply emotional. To share fire was to share life, and that created a mental environment ripe for deep, uninterrupted sleep. Children in Viking households were raised in this atmosphere of continuous closeness. From birth, they were swaddled in furs and kept near their mothers at night. As they grew, they learned the rhythms of the home, when to speak softly, when to feed the fire, how to share space respectfully. This early exposure to communal sleeping built emotional resilience. Children who sleep near their caregivers often show lower levels of stress hormones and higher levels of oxytocin, the bonding hormone. These chemicals foster trust and psychological comfort, making sleep safer and more soothing. Elders, too, played a vital role in the Viking sleep ecosystem. Unlike today's tendency to isolate older family members in separate rooms or even facilities, Viking elders remained central. Their presence in the longhouse brought not only wisdom and stories, but also a sense of continuity and security. Children would fall asleep to the voice of a grandparent recounting tales of gods and heroes. Adults would rest knowing the most experienced members of the family were watching over them. This multi-generational intimacy enriched emotional well-being for all. And let's not forget the emotional comfort that comes from hearing soft sounds of breathing, the crackle of the fire, the wind outside while being huddled among your own. These natural soundscapes, free of modern-day disturbances like sirens, phones, or traffic, created a backdrop of familiarity and calm. Shared living might seem noisy to us today, but for the Vikings, those ambient sounds were a lullaby. The creaking of wood, the whisper of voices, the occasional snore, all reminders that one was safe, cared for, and surrounded by life. Interestingly, Even the concept of personal privacy was different in Viking society. While today's culture emphasizes individual space as a right and necessity, the Vikings saw shared space as a strength. Conflict, grief, joy, illness, all were experienced together. This collective lifestyle reduced feelings of alienation. And when emotional struggles arose, they weren't faced alone. A grieving mother, a worried father, or a fearful child would always have someone nearby, to comfort, to talk, or simply to be present. This emotional availability translated into fewer sleepless nights, less mental burden, and a healthier psyche. The role of affection and physical touch cannot be overstated. In communal sleeping arrangements, physical closeness was inevitable. And with that came hugs, hand-holding, shared blankets, and body heat. These interactions naturally increased the release of endorphins and oxytocin, reinforcing emotional security. Even among adults, this proximity helped maintain social bonds and kept the family unit strong. In contrast to today's isolated, tech-driven lifestyles, the Vikings experienced a level of human intimacy that was constant and grounding. Beyond family, even friendships and neighborly bonds extended this warmth. In smaller villages or during voyages, Vikings often slept beside comrades or fellow travelers. Raiding parties or long sea journeys necessitated sleeping shoulder to shoulder. Trust was built through shared hardship, and that trust translated into emotional comfort. It's no surprise that Viking warriors spoke of their brothers in arms with reverence. They were not just battle companions but literal sources of warmth and safety at night. From a purely biological standpoint, shared sleeping in cool climates also made perfect sense. The Scandinavian winters were brutally cold. Body heat became a shared resource. Cuddling, whether with children, spouses, or others, was a survival tactic. And it brought with it not only physical warmth but emotional calm. Waking up cold, alone, and vulnerable simply wasn't part of Viking life. Their sleeping system ensured that each body helped the other rest more deeply. Ultimately, the Viking approach to sleep, anchored in togetherness, created a strong foundation for mental health. Today, sleep specialists often recommend co-sleeping or family beds in early childhood to promote bonding and regulate sleep cycles. The Vikings lived that truth every night, not by theory but by tradition. Their homes were built around the idea that warmth was communal, not just from fire but from family. In a world where modern bedrooms are isolated behind doors, glowing with phone screens and echoing with loneliness, the Viking longhouse offers a powerful lesson. We are not meant to sleep alone. We are social beings wired for closeness, comfort, and connection. And when those elements are present, the body relaxes, the mind releases its tensions, and sleep comes easily, not as a struggle but as a shared surrender. So when we ask how the Vikings slept so soundly, part of the answer lies not in what they ate, drank, or believed, but in who they slept beside. Wrapped in fur, warmed by flame, and surrounded by those they loved, the Vikings fell asleep not just as individuals, but as a family, bound by blood, firelight, and quiet trust. White heavy checkmark. Let me know when you're ready for Chapter 9. No artificial light equals melatonin boost, or if you'd like this chapter adjusted for tone, visuals, or voiceover pacing. You said. Chapter 9. No artificial light equals melatonin boost. Now start with Chapter 1 and write me this chapter in paragraph wise. No in poetic wise word count. 1,200 firelight, candles, and darkness maintain body's melatonin. Unlike today's phones and LEDs, Vikings had no blue light interference. Body naturally knew when to sleep. ChatGPT said. Absolutely, Jawiria. Here is your Chapter 9. No artificial light equals melatonin boost, written in clear paragraph style and expanded to match your 1,200-word target. This chapter explores how the Viking use of natural light helped regulate their sleep cycles through melatonin balance, and contrasts it with modern artificial light interference. Chapter 9. No artificial light equals melatonin boost. Approximate. 1,200 words. When it comes to getting deep, restorative sleep, one of the most important, yet often overlooked, elements is light. Not just how much light, but the type, the timing, and the way it interacts with our biology. In today's world, we're surrounded by artificial light from all directions. Phones, TVs, computers, LEDs, street lamps, it's inescapable. But back in Viking times, there were no light bulbs or digital screens. Light came from nature, and nature doesn't disrupt the body. In fact, the lack of artificial light may have been one of the greatest hidden reasons why Vikings slept so well. To understand this, we need to look at a powerful hormone called melatonin, sometimes known as the sleep hormone. Melatonin is naturally produced by the pineal gland in the brain. Its job is simple yet crucial. It tells the body when it's time to rest. Melatonin levels rise when it gets dark and drop when it's light out. This creates what scientists call a circadian rhythm, a natural 24-hour cycle that tells our body when to sleep and when to wake up. The cleaner and more consistent this rhythm is, the better we sleep. Now here's the problem in modern life. Blue light, the kind that glows from phone screens, TVs, tablets, and LED bulbs, interferes with melatonin production. When we stare at our phones before bed or leave lights on late into the night, we're tricking our brain into thinking it's still daytime. This delays the release of melatonin, shortens deep sleep, and causes insomnia, restlessness, and groggy mornings. It's one of the biggest contributors to modern sleep disorders, and it simply didn't exist in the Viking world. The Vikings had none of this artificial interference. Their evenings were naturally dark, lit only by the soft, flickering glow of firelight or perhaps the occasional beeswax candle. Firelight, unlike artificial blue light, doesn't block melatonin. It actually complements the body's rhythm. The reddish-orange hue of fire mimics the setting sun, sending a natural message to the brain, it's time to slow down. For the Vikings, fire wasn't just warmth or cooking power, it was a perfect sleep aid. This dim, gentle lighting had a psychological effect as well. The low light helped the body transition gradually into rest. There was no shocking brightness at night, no overhead glare keeping the mind alert. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, the Viking household would ease into quiet routines. Conversations slowed, tasks finished, and bodies naturally began to relax. The brain, free from stimulation, began its descent into sleep mode. Melatonin flowed freely, uninterrupted, guiding them into deeper, more consistent sleep cycles. Contrast this with today's routine. Many people scroll through social media or binge TV right up until they try to sleep. The bright screens and visual noise not only delay melatonin release but also keep the mind overstimulated. We try to jump from alert to asleep in minutes, but that's not how the body works. The Vikings followed a gradual, nature-led wind down, and their sleep quality was better for it. It's not just about the type of light but also the rhythm of light exposure. The Vikings woke with the sun and slept when it disappeared. Their bodies were in tune with seasonal cycles, longer days in summer, longer nights in winter. There were no blackout curtains, no late-night Netflix, no just one more email at midnight. Their sleep schedule was dictated by the rising and setting of the sun, which maintained the integrity of their biological clock. This regularity helped their bodies optimize everything from hormone production to digestion, immune function, and brain activity. Sleep came naturally, not as something they had to fight for. And importantly, they likely experienced higher levels of REM sleep, the stage of sleep critical for memory, emotional balance, and learning. Without modern disruptions, the Vikings gave their brains the best conditions for real recovery. Even their architectural choices reflected this natural balance. Viking homes had small windows and relied mostly on daylight. At night, darkness was accepted, not feared. People didn't push back against the natural order by trying to stay awake long past sunset. Instead, the home would quiet down, lit only by the fireplace or a few candles. This kind of environment signaled to everyone, from adults to children, that it was time to rest. No buzzing lights, no glowing screens, just nighttime as nature intended. Interestingly, some historians believe that Vikings didn't always sleep through the night in one continuous block. Like many pre-industrial societies, they may have followed a pattern called biphasic sleep, two distinct sleep periods divided by a short time of quiet wakefulness in the middle of the night. During that wakeful period, people might reflect, talk softly, stoke the fire, or tend to simple chores, all done in dim light. This practice wasn't disruptive to their sleep but rather aligned with natural cycles. Melatonin levels remained high, and the second sleep would be just as deep as the first. This rhythm, too, was only possible in a world free from bright nighttime lighting. The connection between light and sleep also affected Viking health in the long term. Consistent, high-quality sleep helps the immune system stay strong, repairs muscle tissue, and even slows aging. Without artificial light to interrupt these processes, the Vikings may have had healthier sleep-related biology than many of us today, despite lacking our medical knowledge or technology. Even their children benefited. In today's world, kids are often exposed to night lights, TV before bed, or even tablet screens. But Viking children fell asleep in dark rooms or beside soft firelight, often lulled by storytelling or the soothing sound of the fire crackling. Their melatonin production was supported from an early age, which could have strengthened their development and emotional regulation. Good sleep isn't just for adults, and the Viking way seemed to understand that instinctively. Today, researchers and sleep experts recommend that modern people mimic Viking habits to restore their natural sleep cycles. That includes dimming lights an hour before bed, avoiding screens after sunset, using red spectrum lighting at night, and going outside in the early morning sun to reset circadian rhythms. All of these practices aim to bring us closer to what the Vikings experienced naturally every day. Perhaps the most fascinating part of the Viking sleeplight story is how accidentally perfect their lifestyle was. They didn't know what melatonin was. They had no scientific understanding of circadian biology. And yet, by simply living in harmony with nature, with fire instead of fluorescent bulbs, with dusk instead of deadlines, they achieved what many of us are desperately chasing today: real, quality sleep. In the end, the lesson from Viking nights is clear. Darkness is not the enemy of rest, it is its greatest ally. Light, when used with intention and in tune with nature, can support the body's natural rhythms. But when abused, it can quietly sabotage our most essential human function: sleep. So if you're lying in bed tonight, staring at a glowing screen, tossing and turning, wondering why your mind won't calm down, think of the Vikings. No blue light. No buzzing phones. Just the glow of the hearth, the darkness outside, and a body that knew exactly what to do. White heavy checkmark. Let me know when you're ready for Chapter 10, The Warrior's Exhaustion, or if you'd like any revisions, visuals, breakdown, or narration cues for this chapter. You said. Chapter 10, The Warrior's Exhaustion. Word count 1200. Now start with Chapter 1 and write me this chapter in paragraph wise. No, in poetic wise. After battles or hunts, deep sleep was necessary for survival. Body recovered through uninterrupted sleep cycles. Sleep equals recharge for next day's survival. ChatGPT said. Of course, Jawiria. Here is your Chapter 10, The Warrior's Exhaustion, written in paragraph form, not poetic, and extended to approximately 1,200 words. This chapter explores how physical exhaustion from the Viking warrior lifestyle contributed to deep, uninterrupted, survival-based sleep. Chapter 10, The Warrior's Exhaustion. Approximate. 1,200 words. The Viking world was not kind to the weak. It demanded strength, endurance, and relentless determination. Every day could bring new physical challenges: rowing for hours through icy fjords, hiking through dense forests, lifting and carrying heavy loads, tending to rugged land, or going to war. The body of a Viking, whether that of a warrior, farmer, or hunter, was under constant physical strain. And that strain did something remarkable: it created the perfect biological conditions for deep, restorative sleep. Not out of luxury or comfort, but because sleep was survival. Vikings didn't just lie down at the end of the day because it was bedtime. They collapsed into sleep because their bodies demanded it. After a day of brutal labor, every muscle aching, sleep wasn't just rest, it was repair. It was as essential to life as food or shelter. Without sleep they couldn't fight. They couldn't hunt. They couldn't sail or farm. Their survival, and that of their clans, depended on their ability to recharge through sleep. One of the most profound effects of physical exertion is the body's natural response to it: fatigue-induced sleep drive. In today's world, people struggle to sleep even after sitting at a desk all day. But the Viking lifestyle ensured that nearly every person, from young to old, engaged in intense, full-body movement throughout the day. Their muscles were constantly activated, their energy reserves burned. By the time night came, the body wasn't restless, it was primed for repair. This kind of exhaustion didn't just encourage sleep, it made sleep non-negotiable. Modern science shows that physical fatigue increases the depth of slow-wave sleep, SWS. The stage of deep, non-REM sleep critical for physical restoration. During this stage, the body repairs muscle tissue, releases growth hormone, and resets the immune system. Viking warriors who endured injury, trauma, and were from both training and battle, needed this kind of sleep more than most. It allowed them to wake stronger, not weaker, even in harsh environments. Their sleep wasn't disturbed by tossing and turning or mind chatter. It was deep, immovable rest, forged by exhaustion and instinct. After battles or long hunts, the Viking body would be depleted. Muscles torn, blood lost, energy consumed. But they didn't have the luxury of modern recovery tools. No protein shakes, no physical therapy, no ice baths. Their healing process was dependent on uninterrupted sleep. In the pitch-dark quiet of their longhouses or in makeshift camps during raids, warriors slipped into sleep not just to rest but to survive. Every hour of sleep was a step toward recovery, every dream a signal that the brain was doing its part to repair the mind and body. Even their mental recovery was rooted in this exhaustion. The trauma of combat, the adrenaline, the emotional toll, the loss of comrades, had to be processed. While the Vikings didn't have psychology as a science, they did have the natural mechanism for emotional regulation. REM sleep, the dream-heavy stage that helps the brain process complex emotions and memories. After the violence of battle, sleep allowed the Viking warrior to reset, emotionally and neurologically, and return to duty without breaking mentally. It's worth noting that Viking warriors didn't have endless campaigns. Between raids and wars, there were long stretches of work on farms, ship repair, or other domestic duties. But even in these times, the lifestyle was no less demanding. Chopping wood, repairing sails, building fortifications, managing livestock, it all required physical intensity. There was no concept of gym workouts. Their version of exercise was survival itself. And again, this natural movement created a biological craving for sleep that didn't require pills, schedules, or therapy. It came as naturally as breathing. Viking sleep was also free from the sedentary dangers we face today. Many people now suffer from sleep disorders not because of emotional stress, but because their bodies aren't tired enough. The mind is overactive but the body has been inactive. In Viking society, the opposite was true. The body was so depleted by sunset that even an active mind couldn't stay awake. Their mental resilience, spiritual beliefs, and exhausting routines worked together to shut down the nervous system the way nature intended, through balance. Even the younger members of Viking society participated in physically demanding tasks. From a young age, boys were taught how to handle weapons, row boats, tend crops, and assist in hunting. Girls helped with grinding grain, managing fires, preparing hides, and carrying supplies. Children weren't coddled, they were integrated into the Viking engine of survival. By evening, even the youngest were physically drained, and like their elders, they sank into sleep easily, their bodies heavy, their minds at peace. It wasn't forced, it was earned. Interestingly, warriors on long journeys or in raiding parties also developed a unique relationship with sleep. They learned to sleep hard and fast. When safety wasn't guaranteed and the next attack could come at dawn, their bodies adapted to recover as quickly as possible. This ability to drop into deep sleep under pressure is still studied in modern military training. It speaks to the power of physical exhaustion in overriding mental noise. The Viking warrior could rest even in chaotic environments because their body simply couldn't function without it. Another factor was their diet and environmental simplicity, which complemented their physical fatigue. Their meals, high in protein and fats, supported muscle recovery. Their surroundings were dark, cool, and quiet. There were no alarms, no midnight alerts, no blue light interference. So when the body needed rest, the environment didn't resist it. It enhanced it. They weren't fighting their environment to sleep. They were supported by it. We often think of sleep today as something fragile, disrupted by noise, stress, or technology. But for the Vikings, sleep was resilient. Their bodies and brains were aligned with what sleep was always meant to be, a daily ritual of renewal. It wasn't optional. It wasn't complicated. It was their most essential tool of survival. Without sleep, they couldn't fight. They couldn't lead. They couldn't live. Sleep was also a strategic weapon. Well-rested warriors performed better in combat. Their reflexes were sharper, their focus clearer, their stamina greater. Viking leaders understood this, even if they didn't call it performance optimization. They knew the value of rest. After all, a tired army was a dead army. Recovery time was part of the rhythm of raiding seasons. Battles were not constant, but when they came, warriors had to be ready. And that readiness began not in training, but in how well they had slept the night before. Today, many elite athletes and soldiers attempt to mimic these ancient practices. They train intensely, limit blue light exposure, eat whole foods, and prioritize recovery. It turns out that Viking life, though brutal and unforgiving, held the keys to peak human recovery and sleep hygiene. So when the fires died down in the longhouse and the warriors laid aside their weapons, they weren't entering sleep casually. They were entering the most crucial phase of recovery, the invisible battlefield where wounds healed, strength returned, and minds reset. And in that darkness, wrapped in furs, their breath slow and steady, they gave themselves over to what their bodies needed most: deep, unbroken, survival-driven sleep. White heavy check mark. Let me know when you're ready for chapter 11. Minimal distractions, maximum rest, or if you'd like a visual prompt guide, narration style, or tone adjustments for this chapter. Absolutely, Jawiria. Below is chapter 11. Lessons modern society can learn, written in clear paragraph format with an approximate word count of 1200, based on your outline points. Chapter 11. Lessons modern society can learn. Approximate. 1200 words. Despite all the progress humanity has made, electricity, smartphones, advanced mattresses, climate control, modern people are sleeping worse than ever. Insomnia, anxiety, and sleep disorders are now part of everyday life. The irony is hard to ignore. While the Viking world was brutal and often unforgiving, their sleep habits were far more aligned with what the human body actually needs. There's much to learn from them if we hope to reclaim the kind of deep, restorative rest they experienced. One of the biggest culprits behind modern poor sleep is light pollution. In Viking times, when the sun set, the day essentially ended. The only light sources were firelight and the occasional oil lamp. That dim, orange glow was soothing and allowed the body to produce melatonin naturally, the hormone responsible for sleep. Today we live under a constant bombardment of artificial lighting. Streetlights bleed through our windows. Bedroom TVs flicker late into the night. Worst of all, we're glued to phones and screens that emit harsh blue light, which tricks the brain into thinking it's still daytime. This suppresses melatonin and delays sleep, leading to restless nights and groggy mornings. Another modern enemy of good sleep is chronic stress. Vikings had their own stresses, of course, threats from enemies, harsh winters, food shortages, but they didn't live with the mental overload that we do today. They weren't checking emails at midnight or scrolling endlessly through bad news. They didn't suffer from comparison anxiety through social media or carry the burden of constant notifications and digital distractions. Their stress came in waves, tied to events, and was often followed by physical action that allowed it to be released. In contrast, our stress is constant and invisible, staying locked in our minds and keeping our bodies on high alert, even when we're trying to sleep. Modern society has also created an environment of disrupted rhythms. The Viking lifestyle, like most ancient cultures, was rooted in nature. Their days were governed by the sun, their activity by the seasons. This allowed their circadian rhythms, the body's natural internal clock, to stay in balance. In contrast, we work night shifts, binge-watch shows until 3 a.m., and consume caffeine far too late in the day. As a result, our biological rhythms are out of sync with the earth, and our sleep quality suffers for it. So, what can we do about it? The answer isn't abandoning modern life completely or moving into a longhouse in the woods. But we can adapt key Viking habits into our current world to improve the way we sleep. It starts with respecting darkness. Try dimming lights in the evening, especially an hour before bed. Replace bright white bulbs with warmer hues. And perhaps most importantly, turn off screens, TVs, tablets, phones, well before bedtime. Give your brain the chance to transition into rest mode, just as the Vikings naturally did when the fire began to die down. Another actionable step is cooling the bedroom. Modern sleep science supports what Vikings experienced naturally. Cool air leads to better sleep. It helps lower the body's core temperature, a biological signal that it's time to rest. Lowering your thermostat slightly at night or opening a window can mimic the cold night air that lulled the Vikings to sleep under fur blankets. Combine this with heavy blankets to create a warm-cold contrast, the same sensation that comes from lying under animal hides in a freezing Nordic cabin. Next, we can take inspiration from the herbal practices of the North. Vikings often relied on herbs for various forms of healing, including sleep. While we don't know every plant they used, herbs like valerian root, mugwort, and chamomile are believed to have been part of their natural medicine. Today, these herbs are widely available as teas or supplements. Incorporating a warm, caffeine-free herbal drink into your nighttime routine can help create a calming ritual that eases the transition from activity to rest. Sleep timing is another critical area. Vikings didn't stay up until 2 a.m. Their world was aligned with the setting sun. We may not be able to go to bed right after sunset, but maintaining a consistent sleep schedule is key. Going to bed and waking up at the same time every day, yes, even on weekends, reinforces your body's internal clock. Over time, your body will begin to anticipate sleep, making it easier to fall and stay asleep. We can also learn from their physical lifestyle. Most people today spend the majority of their day sitting, at desks, in cars, on couches. Our bodies aren't tired the way Viking bodies were. That's why so many people feel tired but wired, exhausted mentally but restless physically. Regular physical activity during the day can fix this. It doesn't have to be intense or even structured. A long walk, carrying groceries, doing chores, all these can contribute to the kind of natural fatigue that prepares the body for rest, just as a day of farming or rowing did for the Vikings. Mental habits matter too. Vikings had a unique spiritual mindset centered on fate, destiny, and acceptance. Their belief in the Norse, mystical beings who wove the threads of fate, gave them a sense of surrender to life's events. While this may sound mythical, it carries a powerful psychological lesson: accept what you can't control. Today we carry our worries to bed, obsessing over the future or things outside our influence. Practicing mental detachment before sleep, through journaling, meditation, or breathing techniques, can help mimic the Viking calm that came from trusting the flow of life. Social dynamics also offer insights. Vikings slept close together, family members, warriors, children. This communal sleeping style may seem foreign now, but it provided something many people today lack: emotional safety. Feelings of loneliness or isolation can disrupt sleep, especially in big cities or among individuals living alone. Creating a feeling of connection before bed, whether through a conversation, a phone call, or a pet, can help replace that sense of community and security. In short, sleeping like a Viking doesn't mean abandoning your phone or living in a cabin in the woods. It means simplifying. It means listening to your body. It means realigning your lifestyle with the natural rhythms that once guided all of humanity. Dim the lights. Move your body. Drink calming herbs. Respect your sleep cycle. Build routines that bring calm, not chaos, to your evenings. These aren't just nostalgic throwbacks. They're scientifically supported strategies that echo back to a time when the body was allowed to rest in the way it was designed to. Of course, no modern life can completely replicate the Viking experience. But even small changes, like reducing screen exposure before bed, cooling your room, or walking more during the day, can yield massive improvements in how deeply and how peacefully you sleep. The goal isn't to be perfect. It's to be intentional, to recognize that in all our progress, we've lost something essential: the respect for rest. In the end, the Vikings remind us that sleep is not weakness, it is survival. And perhaps our overworked, overstimulated world needs to hear that message more than ever. To sleep like a Viking is to return to the basics: effort, exhaustion, peace, and renewal. That's not just a historical curiosity, it's a roadmap for reclaiming the kind of deep sleep that modern people so desperately need. White heavy checkmark, ready to continue with Chapter 12. Conclusion: Reclaiming Ancient Rest. Or want help creating a narration voice style or thumbnail idea for this chapter? 2 of 2. You said. Chapter 12. Conclusion: Reclaiming Ancient Rest. Word count 1200. Now start with Chapter 1 and write me this chapter in paragraph wise. No, in poetic wise. Reflect. The Vikings were warriors, yet they knew rest. Final thought: maybe they weren't just stronger, they were smarter. Call to action: try sleeping like a Viking tonight. ChatGPT said. Chapter 12. Conclusion: Reclaiming Ancient Rest. For all their legendary strength, brutal raids, and fearsome reputation, the Vikings were also deeply human. They loved, grieved, fought, and healed. And amid the chaos of survival, they understood something we've nearly forgotten in the modern age: the power of rest. They may have been warriors by trade, but they were also masters of sleep by necessity. Their survival depended on it. And maybe, in that way, they weren't just stronger than us, maybe they were smarter. Viking sleep was not optimized through apps or sleep trackers. It wasn't enhanced by memory foam or blackout curtains. It was pure, instinctual, and aligned with the rhythms of nature. When the sun dipped below the horizon, the world turned dark. Firelight flickered, furs were wrapped, and exhaustion pulled the body into sleep. It wasn't complicated. There was no overthinking, no hustle culture to battle, no glowing screens to resist. It was rest as nature intended: earned, uninterrupted, and sacred. In modern society, rest is often treated as an afterthought, something we fit in between obligations, or worse, something we feel guilty about needing. We pride ourselves on late nights, early mornings, endless productivity, and little sleep. But the Vikings, who had far more dangerous lives, didn't treat rest as weakness. They treated it as a weapon of survival. Without sleep they couldn't farm, fight, sail, or defend. Their bodies would break, their minds would fray. So they respected the night, and what it offered. This isn't to say the Viking world was ideal. It was harsh and demanding, full of violence and uncertainty. But precisely because of that brutality, they didn't have the luxury of ignoring their body's needs. They didn't try to outsmart nature. They aligned with it. And that is the lesson we must take from them. In an age where we have more knowledge, technology, and comfort than ever before, we've somehow become disconnected from the very rhythms that once kept us alive. We've covered how Viking sleep was shaped by their environment: cold nights, firelight, heavy physical exhaustion, and an absence of artificial distractions. We've looked at how their food, activity levels, beliefs, and routines contributed to deep, replenishing rest. And most importantly, we've seen how sleep was not optional for them, it was a daily act of survival. Today we treat sleep like it's negotiable. Something we can sacrifice for a deadline, skip for a party, push off for just one more episode. But the consequences are real: rising rates of anxiety, burnout, insomnia, and chronic fatigue. We've created a world that fights our biology instead of flowing with it. And in doing so, we've lost something essential: the ability to truly rest. So what do we do now? We start small. You don't need to live in a wooden longhouse or hunt your own food to sleep like a Viking. But you can begin by honoring the night again. Dim the lights when the sun goes down. Unplug from your screens an hour before bed. Create a bedtime ritual that calms your mind: herbal tea, reading, journaling. Keep your room cool and dark. Allow your body to wind down the way it's meant to. You can also reflect on your daily effort. Are you physically moving enough to earn the kind of sleep your body was designed for? Even a long walk, light exercise, or stretching can help restore the natural fatigue response your ancestors once relied on. The body sleeps better when it's been used. Just as the Vikings labored through farming, rowing, and battle, we too must reconnect with movement. Your mindset also matters. The Vikings believed in fate, the afterlife, and the natural cycles of life. They didn't obsess over what they couldn't control. They acted, then rested. In contrast, we ruminate. We replay conversations, stress about emails, and spiral in our thoughts at 2 a.m. But we can train ourselves just like them to let go. Breathing exercises, guided sleep meditations, or simply journaling out your thoughts can help signal the brain that it's safe to rest. And let's not forget the communal aspect of Viking life. They slept near each other, family, warriors, children, creating a sense of safety and shared experience. While our modern world prizes independence, humans still thrive on connection. A bedtime phone call with a loved one, a pet curled at your feet, or even a gratitude list can help recreate that same emotional warmth. Sleep is easier when we don't feel alone. More than anything, the Viking approach teaches us this: rest is part of the battle, not a break from it. A rested warrior fights better. A rested parent leads better. A rested mind thinks clearer. And in today's overstimulated, overworked world, choosing to sleep deeply is a rebellious act. One that restores our strength in ways no productivity hack ever could. If a Viking could face life or death situations daily and still make time for true full-body rest, we can too. They didn't need permission to sleep, it was embedded into their survival instinct. We've simply forgotten how to listen to that instinct. But it's still there, waiting to be remembered. So maybe they weren't just stronger than us. Maybe they weren't just tougher or braver. Maybe, in the quiet hours of the night, under the stars and firs, when their muscles ached and their fire dimmed, maybe they were smarter. They trusted their bodies. They followed nature's lead. They knew that no weapon, no raid, no conquest mattered if they didn't have the energy to rise the next day. You've learned the tactics. You've seen how firelight shaped melatonin